All right, so it looks like me and Michael use the exact same theme, so that's pretty cool, but that's okay. First off, I'm pretty excited to give this presentation. I don't do too many of these, so please bear with me, but there's a lot of stuff that started off with creating our first application with Commerce7. And it was intriguing to go through some of the process, and hopefully you don't laugh too hard on some of the stuff, but first off, I wanted to mention, my name's Justin. We've been in the industry for quite a while in general, like more like the web side of things. Like Michael's mentioned, we really love the WordPress side of things, the WooCommerce side of things. That's where we started. And as of the last, at least 4 years or so, we've started specializing in the e-commerce side in general stores, not specifically to wineries. But we eventually came on as official partners with Commerce7 in late of last year. And we're excited to see where that goes. And this first app was some serious growing pains that we ourselves went through, but also in the same sense of learning. And we're just excited to see what the future holds with them. We created the product Assistant 7. What exactly is Assistant 7? We built this app to be more of an integration product with Commerce7, not necessarily one product. The purpose entirely was to encompass a suite of helpful tools, whether that was, just like with Michael working on the WordPress plugins, if it was perhaps an built-in app, or in this particular case, we ended up building a Chrome browser extension. And we started building that out, and the initial goal for Assistant 7 was we're going to build a guest counter. So the overview of our product for the guest counter was, we had a client come to us, say, hey, we need to solve this problem. The challenge is that we have guests coming into our store, our winery. We want to know how many guests are actually coming in and how many orders they're making off of those numbers of guests. So what's their conversion rate of walk-ins? So our initial thought was, we need to find a simple solution. The service staff needs to be prompted. It needs to be easy. Everybody's busy, so they're hopping in and out between products, and it has to be right in their face. So that was kind of like the first go around that we had to figure out the solutions. And so we started playing around with the Commerce7's APIs to see what was possible. And this kind of led us to what our main goals was really had to be easy, and it had to prompt the service workers to really, find out how many guests there were, and it had to be right in their face. So we ended up starting off with building a browser extension, and we personally had never built a browser extension with Chrome before. That was kind of a first stepping stone, but we found just some personal challenges with working with directly just the API, because we felt it wasn't going to be as user friendly, because it needed to be more in their face and not like stepping around things. So we thought, okay, well, a good point of view will be we'll build a browser extension. So we ran through a couple of iterations of the extension. We felt that we were happy with the result. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that's the actual browser extension. Right inside there, it was a contact search at first. That was fine. That was no problem. But what it did was, when you visited the POS inside Commerce7, we ended up running through a ton of DOM manipulation to do that. So it's kind of hard to see. I had to take a screenshot from an old video, but you see the guest counter down below, and it was right there and enabled. We did have it as a model pop-up, but that was a different story. Really, what we wanted it to do is that when that service worker comes through, they need to be able to say, yep, that's a guest counter, quick, pop it in, and move on to the next step, right? So we were pretty happy with how this turned out. The client was pretty happy. And it really came down to learning lots of facets about this. So we showed our customer, our client, the video recording that we did of how it worked, how it was being used, how it was being displayed upon for each, how would you say, service worker exactly, but they were excited. We showed them on, I think it was a Thursday or a Friday, and then they were so excited, like, we got to get this working Monday or Tuesday. And so I was like, oh boy, we had to get ensure that our application was approved by Google Chrome's extensions. And so we started pushing it as fast as we could. And, we got it running pretty good up until, I think we actually even got it working for Monday. And it was actually quite funny. It's like, as soon as we did that, we got it working, we installed it, we talked to him on the phone to get it working. And basically, we ended up going for 2 days later after that. We realized, well, where are the reports? This product ended up becoming, well, it was great for input of the data, but it wasn't necessarily great for what do I do with the data. Initially, how we built it was based upon what we call the meta tags or the metadata on the order. And so the benefit of this really was that we never really had to end up building any form of database, any real back-end structure, because all the data that we worked with went directly onto the order, the metadata of the order. And so it was really beneficial to us. So instantly it was great for us. But down the road, running reports on the metadata didn't seem like the most viable option. And it was a whole other set of challenges that we had to start figuring out. And so the next step after that, as soon as after we had the conversation about the reports, is like, okay, great. I started working on building some reports and started figuring out some of the other details. And then the next problem arose. How do we get this to work on our iPad? I was like, oh no. It started becoming a real challenge here. What have we done? This is not going to be a workable solution, because at first we thought it was going to be more computers because we asked her using the Chrome extension, using the computer-based system. And it was yes, but didn't realize there was also iPads were included. And if you're not entirely sure, Chrome extensions do not work on iPads. That was a big falter on our own behalf. And we didn't do enough digging, really, what it came down to. And so we knew this isn't going to be a long-term solution, our setup. We had to reroute, restart figuring out, basically go right back to the drawing board and kind of figure out what our plan of action was. So unfortunately, that was some oversight on our own behalf. But thankfully, we had Andrew to talk to and the rest of the team on Slack and everyone else. But we realized there was so much more in there, and that we sort of had to figure out what that Andrew was actually right. And the fact that, I'm sure he got sick of me saying, hey, Andrew, are you online? Got a good question for you. But we realized we couldn't use any of the other solutions that we initially came up with. Using the whole browser extension was just total scrap. And we realized we had to use the point of sale more actions drop down button, if you're familiar with that. And obviously we should have just listened to Andrew from the beginning, but our own demise, I suppose. Even though we went through so many iterations of the product and the realizations of what we went through, we're super happy with how things ended up in the past, or ended up now. But that kind of continued to bring us through to version 2, version 3. We kind of started recoding a lot of the pieces of our application, because now we're having to realize, okay, well, we need a form of backend, not just because now we're having to hold the data. What's our solution for that? Our initial thought was, our initial thoughts when we built the app was purely for our one client. We were very tunnel visioned on this for some reason. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was because it was just before Christmas of last year. And we were very tunneled on, this is just for one person. So we don't need to build some big fancy situation, some big setup. They were initially willing to pay for the product as a, more or less a one-time pay for this. We'll make this happen and we'll get it onto. So we started working with Commerce7's API to really build out the back end, kind of build up our own setup. We come from a background of PHP, so we started doing with what we knew. We even eventually started storing the data just directly into JSON data files on a server. We even mitigated the whole database structure. This was fast. It ended up being really efficient, actually. We had a great JSON SQL-like query structure. We had lots of caching involved, so there was no delaying of the structure. And from our point of view, we're doing good. We're making it happen. We're rushing to get this product done before the end of the year. And everything was going great, or, so we thought. And then, so we ended up showing our customer what we came up with, and they're really happy with the improvements. We had an actual report reporting side of things. You can actually see the UI and how to actually see the number of guests that were coming in and out. So they were pretty excited. So while that was all happening, we started watching some of the order data come through on our back end and what we ended up building out. And we found out that other customers started installing the app. And we're like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I don't know why we never expected it for some reason. I think just because our mindset was quick to turn around, quick to focus, just make something happen, and perhaps a little lack of foresight on our own behalf, right? So basically 1 week later, we got into looking at the data that was being housed on our servers, like, okay, maybe we need to start making some changes. So we realized that with our setup, we ended up noticing a lot of issues with the actual data itself. That ended up becoming some duplicate content of the orders. There was even some simple things like encoding issues in our own files, and started bubbling up and creating all sorts of other issues. And I'm sure, you know, you're already cringing at the fact that we use JSON file documents instead of proper database server setups. And we kind of realized this too. And, you know, next version came about, and I know Andrew was like, man, you really pumped through the versions. But that's true, we were. But once again, we realized our initial setup was total garbage. We had to start all over again. We needed to get a more stable setup, something that was a little bit more scalable. Even though it's not perfect, we needed something stable. So we started thinking about storing our data using actually Google Firestore or Mongo, whatever your preference is in that sense. But it was going to be a little bit more for, you know, better speed, better growth, and flexibility. But the options needed to, you know, we started creating the options, started implementing some of those pieces, and thought, you know, we'll stick with Google Firestore. That's going to be a pretty good option for us. And as we started diving into it and handling the data that we are already receiving, in the structure of our current app, we needed to figure out how, you know, how do we migrate this data into the new platform? It started to become a challenge, really, to be honest. And it was great for the single client that we had. But as we started thinking about the whole migration process, we're like, man, this is starting to become really overkill. And I still, to this point, our mindset was still very narrow-minded. But like this entire app process, you know, there was a huge mix of not enough questions, more time and money wasted, really, to be honest, terrible oversight on our own behalf, and all because, you know, we really wanted it done before Christmas, or actually the end of the year, which, needless to say, the same thing. So, you know, our solution was, not that it's a perfect solution, but our solution was that we ended up using Vue as our UI. We really like the way Vue works. We ended up using MySQL, so really we ended up keeping it on our current server that we had set up. We didn't want to create any new technologies, new management, new headaches, or anything like this. So we thought, you know, let's just stick with what we have versus recreating some stuff that we needed. And we ended up having to build our own API, which is totally fine, but there ended up becoming a lot more to the project than we initially thought, and specifically not just for one client. It ended up starting to grow a little bit. The plan was, though, for even our own API was for future growth. As we started thinking about, you know what, let's start making some more apps with Commerce7. Sounds like a good idea. You know, speaking, I think, with Carson about some of the other apps that were, you know, requested. So we started working on even the product reviews that we just launched not too long ago. That's a work in progress. But we knew that we needed something a little bit more stable. And this kind of made the most sense for us, being able to manage it all without expanding our products and services too far out there, keeping some of the complexities down, and even some extra costs at that time. As our app is actually free on the store, so we didn't want to add any own costs to ourselves. So as of today, we haven't run into any challenges. We are currently, I think, around 30 tenants using our guest counter. We're extremely happy with it. You know, obviously it took us 5 iterations to get there, even though we had to scrap every single part before, but that's okay. I think in the end, everything turned out pretty good for the most part. And I was quite surprised actually that our product was shown off in the previous presentation, but this is the UI that we're currently working with. We were trying to provide not just here's a bunch of data, just like, you know, Google Analytics, if you remember that. We wanted to provide more of actionable insight, you know, whether it be your capture rate, whether it's how much they actually spent while they're there, and filtering down by the POS profiles, if it's inside their store, outside their store, the channels and everything else. So thankfully Vue is really good at, you know, lifting a lot of graph data and state managements and everything else. All the technologies were really helpful that way. This here is just a screenshot kind of showing you guys what we've put together. This was the actual, for the customer service worker, they're able to, you know, input the number of guest counters as they're coming through. But, you know, growth is growth, I think, right? And I'm sure Andrew's happy to not be releasing all my versions every second week, but all in all, even though it was a roller coaster of versions with features, rebuilds, restructures, we're happy. Unfortunately, we didn't ask the right questions at the beginning. And for some reason, I'm not sure why, but I think it's just because it was too fast and too much was going on. But I'm sure we've all gone through something similar, making far too many mistakes and not asking the right questions, newbie things. But for many years, all these critical questions are very vital. And even though we're still making tweaks, it's a fun thing to see our product being used nowadays. And let's hope we don't have to make any future major rebuilds in the near future. Thanks a lot.
Hey, thank you so much.